Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Former Congressman Chris Smith is a wonderful, Chris Stewart is a wonderful expert on an area about which I know nothing. Chris Stewart knows critical minerals. Now, Congressman, welcome back. Good to see you again. I didn't know you had an engineering degree in critical minerals or something like that. What's the degree in?
Well, it's not critical minerals. I'll tell you that. If any member of Congress or former member of Congress claims to be an expert in anything, you got to know they're at least exaggerating and probably just outright lying about it.
Well, no, O'Brien tells me and Gallagher tells me they know you from your time on the House Intel Committee that you're actually a real smart guy, and I should listen to you on this stuff. And you're an engineer, right?
I'm actually not. I'm a former Air Force pilot. I got my degree in economics. I'm not smart enough to be an engineer. Back to my original point about members of Congress, right?
I thought everyone who went to the academies had to be an engineer.
Well, I'm not an academy guy. I wasn't smart enough to get in the academy. So you're just reinforcing the point over and over again.
So tell me, I read your piece on critical minerals in the Hill, and I said, we got to talk to him about this. But tell me why we should listen to you to begin with. Is it because you're on the House Intel Committee?
Yeah, and because I've spent a lot of time in Africa, and I've spent a lot of time, Mike Gallagher, who you mentioned before, he and I were senior members on the Chinese task force, which was the first effort in Congress to really be serious about how do we counter China. And you can't talk about countering China without recognizing how incredibly dependent we are on them. For example, pharmaceuticals, which after COVID, a lot of people know that now. Manufacturing. But I think one of the very most critical is with critical minerals. I mean, broadly, 70% of the critical minerals that the U.S. uses every year, 70% comes from China's process in China. And some of the more elegant ones, exotic ones, it's in the 90%. And I think you have to realize, and a lot of people do, that chip manufacturing shuts down, automobile manufacturing shuts down, missile technology, drone technology. Very broadly, our entire national security industrial base is dependent on these critical minerals. And how in the world did we put ourselves in a position where we said, yeah, it's okay to be 70 to 90% reliant on an adversary like China? It's just foolish economic policy. And we're in the stages of changing that. But
Congressman, what I think we did over 40 years was export pollution. We wanted a clean country, so we didn't want to have any mines. We didn't want to have any dirty hands on anything. So even though we need cobalt and lithium and all that other stuff, the green agenda, which could be imposed on America, can't be imposed on China or places where they need economic development. So we outsourced our pollution. Now we need to reshore the ability to obtain cobalt, lithium. I can't even name some of them. How many different critical minerals are there?
Generally 17 is what's accepted. But you could add to that list, and actually we do add to it as manufacturing becomes more and more sophisticated. The real irony to your point, Hugh, is that we exported that responsibility to China. And do you think that they're nearly as concerned about environmental regulations or environmental outcomes as the U.S. was? Of course they're not. Do you think they care that they're building, a dirty coal electrical facility every week and the environmental impacts of that? Of course they're not. And one other, if I could, very particular to critical minerals, you set up Chinese mines all throughout Africa that knowingly employ child slave labor. U.S. companies, Western companies don't do that. They would never do that. But China
the International
does.
Justice Mission is close to my heart, and they've educated me on child labor in Africa, and we don't want to subsidize that. But your piece argues that we can have a relationship with many countries in Africa that will respect basic human rights for their workers and at the same time get the critical minerals that we need. Which countries are we talking about? Because some of them aren't very stable.
Well, a number of them aren't, and we have to consider that. Everyone recognizes that. And some of them are led by leaders that we shouldn't trust. We don't trust now, but we still can have a relationship with them and try to help them, try to bring them along. But DRC, for example, 70% of the cobalt. That's one example. I mean, there's a number of African countries. And one other point about this that I think is important to note: there's been a lot of media, a lot of expectation about the critical minerals piece in Ukraine. And the president made that one of the cornerstones of his peace negotiations, and I think it's going to have to be. And by the way, the president was 100% right when he recognized, although President Zelensky didn't recognize it, not until it was too late, that would have been the tripwire that would have protected Ukraine from, another invasion from Vladimir Putin or from Russia. But that's been put on the back burner now, and I think it's probably to still be a piece of those peace settlements, peace negotiations, but it's not the priority it was, say, a month ago. At the same time, the EU is aggressively working in Africa for these critical mineral elements, as obviously well behind China still. So
has Secretary Rubio, Congressman, has Secretary Rubio appointed an assistant secretary for Africa? Because it seems to me this file ought to be in that individual's desk on the top of it, actually.
Yeah, for sure. And in fact, I had a chance to speak with him over the last few days, and it will be one of the very top priority on his agenda. In fact, it might be next to protecting, some of the concerns we have in some of the African nations about human rights, and especially regarding children. But again, that's not universal throughout Africa. That's only a few places. But more universal is the rich critical earth and minerals that they have access to, and trying to position ourselves to take advantage of that. The national security implications and the economic security implications are just enormous. We can't rely on China. Probably not wise to rely on Ukraine. And why not help some of our friends in Africa? Help them develop economically. They would certainly be more reliable than the other two sources. And it really is a classical win-win for us, but it's urgent.
Well,
and
it makes perfect sense to me. I don't understand what they are used for or how you spell them, but I know we need them, and China slapped a huge tariff on them. Who has the lead, Congressman Stewart? You're out of town now. Who has the lead on establishing these relationships that we need? We got about a minute.
Well, and if I could reiterate something you said, China not only is slapping tariffs on them, they're cutting us off.
Yep.
They cut off them a couple of weeks ago, and then just a few days ago cut off another 7. And they have the ability to completely control the market. So it's tariffs and also just excluding us from the market. So who has lead? Obviously China. We all know that. They have for a generation now. Second is the EU. They've been working really aggressively in Africa for the last 3 or 4 years. And then finally, the United States. Now, can the U.S. win that race? You bet we can. Can we position ourselves ahead of China and the EU? Absolutely, we can. And do many of the African nations want to work with U.S.? If you were to ask them who's their preferred partner, many of them would say it is the United States. But we've got to get more serious at it than we have been. Thankfully, I think we're beginning to see that.
Former Congressman Chris Stewart, thank you so much for joining me. Next time I'll get your university and your degree right. I want to attribute to you engineering skills you haven't got. I knew you were Air Force. I just assumed the academy. Bad assumption. Bad assumption. Chris Stewart, one of the good guys. Keep coming back, Congressman. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned.